Let's get ready to piss some people off. I just saw Good Night and Good Luck, and I wanted to talk about this. This is a historic event. This is the first time that a Broadway play has been live streamed to the world. They just did it on CNN with support of HBO Max. That's how I saw it, and I wanted to talk about this play. I never get to talk about plays, but I think it's just so entrenched in movies. One, the fact that this is based on a movie that was directed and starred George Clooney, and now George Clooney has taken the lead and role in this play. This is his first real debut on Broadway, and I wanted to talk about the merits, the downfalls of this play, but also talk about the larger context of which this play existed, and the fact that it was broadcast on CNN, and the irony that I found in that, and some of the disgust that I had in that. This is going to be a review. For a lot of it, this is also going to be, I think, an indictment on the mainstream media, which is also something that I want to explore in, because that is essentially a lot of the core themes of this play. So for those who are not familiar with George Clooney's 2005 film, Good Night and Good Luck, I'll just read the synopsis right here. This is an adaptation of that film and focuses on the conflict between veteran CBS journalist Edward R. Murrow and U.S. Senator Joseph McCarthy. In the 2005 film, Clooney did not play Murrow. He was a producer character in that movie. Here he is now front and center as Murrow. He is the veteran actor leading this story that has a lot of discussions about the then and the now, and how this film that came out as a response to the Iraq War is maybe a little bit more precedent and shocking now due to the attacks that the country is currently facing. And let's just kind of get this out of the way. Is this going to be a bias / left-leaning review? This is a Broadway play starring George Clooney about the ethics of journalism and standing up to McCarthyism and standing up for free speech, that also has a direct montage about Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And it got broadcast on CNN. And again, it stars George Clooney. Yes, this is going to have a liberal slant to that. If you're annoyed by that, and you didn't want that, I don't know what to tell you anymore. That's what this is, and so I'm going to talk about it in that context, so get over it, I guess. But here's what I found really interesting about this story, and for those who are unaware, because the play doesn't actually do this, great job of setting up what's going on in the world at this time of the play. This is 1950s, and we have this senator in Joseph McCarthy, who is essentially prosecuting anybody that he has suspicions of them being a communist. This is the Red Scare, and this is McCarthyism at its full height. And Edward R. Murrow is this CBS journalist who essentially starts learning a little bit about this, and he's one, McCarthy's just a whack job, and two, what he's doing is completely illegal, and we need to be reporting on just his breaking of the law and what he's doing that is unethical. And it becomes this whole tension between essentially an expansion of journalism, as I would call it, which is in some ways, I guess you could call it response. This is directly responding to something going on in the news, not just reporting the news, directly having an opinion on it. But two, also just this idea of what accountability looks like within journalism and what that means. Before this, as the Broadway play displays it, there wasn't much of that discussion going on. And in this film, I keep calling it a film, but in this film and Broadway play, that is entirely the idea of what good journalism looks like and what the American public needs and values when it is done correctly. And like I said, you see these two people basically going at it. Now, Joseph McCarthy is briefly in this Broadway play, but he's not the main focus of this. This is a lot more of the exploration of Murrow, his relationship with CBS, his relationship with the network, the producers, basically what going after McCarthy, the issues that it will entail. And let's just kind of start with the praises of this, which I think there's one very obvious one that I want to praise, and that's the George Clooney performance as Murrow. I really like George Clooney as an actor, and I also think that George Clooney can suffer from I'm going to call it liberal smugness, for lack of a better word, which is essentially that like he can give off this feeling of I'm right, I'm making a point, this is important, and it almost kind of feels like homework. And I was a little concerned about this with Good Night and Good Luck, where I'm just going to be like, okay, I largely agree with probably majority of George Clooney's political beliefs, or if not even like perfectly agree with them, like I'm generally probably fairly close to him on the political spectrum. So I'm like, it's like, I know that I'm probably going to be like, yeah, I agree with that. That doesn't make like a good work of art. So that's where I was a little worried of it, like not even feeling like it was necessarily in a bubble, but just being like, is this like scathing? Is this saying anything important for this moment? Or is it just kind of everyone patting themselves on the back and being like, yeah, that's what it should be. Like this optimism that truthfully I just don't have in the media right now. And I was pleasantly then surprised with the George Clooney performance, which I think is a very veteran performance from a guy who's now kind of veteran Hollywood. Like this guy who is now aged into being one of these older leading men in Hollywood. He is 64 years old, so he has that kind of like dignity and gravitas that he did not have 20 years ago when Good Night and Good Luck debuted, and he would have been like 44. So I think he does a really good job as Murrow, and I found it interesting to see him essentially switch roles and go from the supporting to the lead, what that looks like and what he's trying to do. Someone compared him kind of to Gene Kelly, and I can definitely see that comparison in the type of performance. There is a dignity that he is able to display on, in this case it's screen, but on stage, that I think he is able to just really capture in on, and being the lack of a better word, like the authority figure for this story and the moral guide, I thought Clooney did a really impressive job as a performer in this. Specifically, his final scene on stage, I think, is just a knockout. It's a really close-up monologue that he's giving, which is essentially, there's different monologues. They're really seemingly just all news reports that this character of Murrow is making throughout the play. And there is this monologue that happens to end the play, where I think it's about probably like 8 minutes, and it's kind of cut into with a montage in the middle of current events. And it's both Murrow, and it's also metatextual in the sense that it also feels like it's Clooney talking directly to the camera. But it is all about the ideas of what journalism is, what the role of it is, and how important it is to the American institution, and how we need to fight to support it, and also where it lies in dangers, all of that. And it's just like this very real moment from Clooney, specifically after the montage ends. The final like 2 minutes of this play, like I noticed it very specifically. You can see the tears in the back of his eyes. I don't think he ever necessarily starts crying as this is being told, but you can actually see the emotion and buy-in that Clooney has as an actor in this moment, and the grief, the pain, the hoping beyond hope that this message will get out and that this will do anything. Like there is that behind the eyes where you really see it and you're like, oh, this is somebody like, one, who's truly believing what they are saying as an actor in this moment, and two, just deeply cares about this character, about this material, and telling this story of Murrow. Like you can really see George Clooney play into that. I think it's a really nuanced, complicated performance that he's delivering in the final few minutes, and I think it's pretty knockout. There's other stuff within this play that I also noticed that I'm just like, there is the, oh, this is George Clooney on Broadway. And like, there's a generosity that the audience gives to him being George Clooney that I'm not sure that they would give to any other performer doing this. I think he does get the benefit of being very famous and being George Clooney, and the audience is there to see George Clooney. So like, there is certainly elements of that in the performance where I'm just like, oh, some of his laugh lines, I think he hits it like a little hard, or like, there's other times where I just like, there was something like with the smoking that all the characters do in here that I just thought looked really fake in this. And maybe again, on stage, it doesn't look that fake when you have the camera like right on these guys. It does look a little fake. So there was stuff like that I noticed within it, but I think again, like there is stuff with the Clooney performance that the closer you put the camera to and the more nuance and structure you see to his face, I think it pays really well in these monologue sequences. In other sequences, you really feel the acting coming through in a way that I just kind of found distracting, where I'm like, oh yeah, this is George Clooney on screen right now. Besides that, this play is really short. I think it's about right under an hour and 40 minutes. And it has the issue, and I remember the movie also having this issue to a degree, but not as substantial as it was in the play, which is just there's a lot of characters to go around in this story. And to be honest, you care about 3, maybe 4 of the max. Like, you're really there for Murrow. You like a few of the other characters, like I think Fred W. Friendly, who was the character that Clooney played in the original movie. Like, I think you care about that character enough. You care about the relationship between, trying to find those characters' names real quick. Warshaba, I believe, is their last names. There's these kind of secret couple in the movie. One of them is played by Ilana Glazer. And, like, she's really good. She's a standout performance for me in this Broadway play. I thought Glazer was really good in this. And, like, I really bought into the emotion. And there's this really good sequence where... Because essentially their story is they have some form of an involvement at one point with the Communist Party or what McCarthy deems to be communist ties. And they have this real discussion of like what that means, what that's going to make for their life and what they need to do. And also what ideologies and beliefs mean. And is it a belief if you're willing to abandon it easily? Like, it's a very quick scene, but I thought it was a really effective scene from Glazer. I think she plays it like exceptionally well. She's the second standout of this for sure after Clooney. I think they're all good, and I don't think anyone in this cast is like particularly bad. I just think every other character is like completely underwritten, and you just don't really get a great understanding of who these characters are. I think that's very true with the Clark Gregg character, Dawn Hollenbeck. And it, like, there's just a lot of characters that are in here, and you're just like, it just kind of keeps going and keeps chugging and chugging. And so I think there really could have actually been a longer play in here that really would have benefited it. One of the other things that I like rubbed up against while watching this play was specifically the fact like this was a movie, and now I'm watching this on TV as a play, but also I guess in kind of many ways like also as a movie. And this Broadway play uses screens a lot to recreate this feeling of 1950s newscasters. So you're often watching like George Clooney in color as his character, and then you also see the screen of him basically doing like a newscast, and he's in black and white to echo that time. It's a really cool trick, and I think it's used fairly well in here. But while watching it, I'm like, this kind of just feels like I'm watching the movie, and the framing shots and all that. Like, it's just like, I didn't understand where they differentiated themselves. I think the over-reliance on screens really reminds you of the fact that this was originally a movie, and it feels so similar to that. I think there could have been a little bit more distance that you could have created. And again, sometimes the screens have really good effects. I think the final few minutes of this screen, the screen is used to really wonderful effects. And like, there are moments throughout there that work really well. From my understanding, and we didn't see a ton of it in the live stream, at least that I noticed. From my understanding from people who've talked about this and saw this on Broadway, there is essentially kind of like ads going along during these scenes, so like to really set you in the 1950s like CBS broadcast. And I think they cut to it a few times, but I think from my understanding, like, they're very heavily used in the Broadway play. And again, it's to create an atmosphere and a feeling. I found it a little hokey when they did it on the screen for how I was watching it. It just didn't really work for me at all times. This does feel like just kind of undercooked. And that doesn't mean that I disliked it. One, because it's a really fast Broadway play, and I think the performances are all strong. if this wasn't George Clooney doing this role, I don't think I'd have much interest in this, and I think it is really putting a heavy burden on George Clooney to make this thing passable to good, which I think he does, and I think he delivers on that, and I think it's a really strong performance from him. That's to say, everything else about it I think was conceptually at times really cool, and doesn't always work out, which is kind of funny because that's kind of how I describe most George Clooney directed movies, where I'm like, there's some good stuff in here and good ideas, but ultimately they don't come to fruition. Now, the thing that I really wanted to talk to, and that's kind of the allusion that I make in my thumbnails, is the irony of this being broadcast on CNN. I will say I just think the CNN broadcast post-show after the play that was hosted by Anderson Cooper and had guys like Bret Stephens, who is this conservative columnist. I don't know if he still writes for the New York Times, but at one point he was a fairly prolific New York Times columnist. Having guys like him on, to hear him talk about this idea of like not wanting advocacy journalism, that he's paid not to have an opinion, all these ideas of truth and fact, and like how truth and fact aren't the same thing, like all the crap Bret Stephens was throwing out there, and like this idea that you have to platform the conservative voice in this, and like again, like what he's saying, what he's believing, all this stuff, and the fact of like the engagement, the way that they're talking about him, like the fact that they're like, well, you can make a good point here, or all this stuff, and you're like, no, he doesn't. Like it, I found that stuff very frustrating, and it's also just the irony of having this on CNN, which is, you know, like, I noticed it when, like, at one point, like, they try selling Jake Tapper's new book about Joe Biden here. And, like, you know, like, hey, like, this book would have been really nice a year ago when, like, you should have reported this, not when you guys were all kind of covering up for the fact that, like, Biden was mentally incapable to be president again. Like, there's so much stuff like this where it's just, like, they're trying to have discussions about being what it looks like to be good journalists, and they're not really able to, like, discuss what that means because, like, the landscape of which they exist in will not allow good journalists to exist like that in the mainstream media in America. Maybe it one day can again. I'm pretty skeptical of that. But to, like I said, here's CNN kind of like, CNN is kind of what my fear of this Broadway play was going to be, where it's like, oh, we're patting ourselves on the back. Look how good of a job we can do. Look what we need to improve, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, no, you're not going to learn any of the right lessons. The way you guys discuss this play, post it, emphasizes the fact that you are incapable of learning this. The fact of Bret Stephens saying this and, like, giving this type of legitimacy to him, to your channel, is just like, oh, this is why we're all screwed. This is a disaster. And again, like I said, it's just CNN being this channel, being what they've done, the way they sensationalize Trump, the fact that they don't really hold Trump accountable to anything, the way they've kind of moved and favored in some conservative ideologies over the past few years. Like, all of that stuff I just find incredibly frustrating and annoying, listening to them talk about it, and actively listen to them not talk about truth to power. And you hear terrible things happening right now in the country on the executive level, and they're just, like, still coming up short on being able to report on this and do anything of value right now in this time. It's the reason mainstream media has essentially died, and so much of the way people consume news is no longer through mainstream media. And when they do, they're listening to people on Fox News. They're listening to propagandists essentially carry water for the Republican Party. I don't know what the fix for this is. I just know it's really bad. And just like I said, the fact is, watching this and knowing this is how CNN thinks and, like, how they were discussing it, I'm like, oh, we're so screwed. That's not related to this Broadway play at all. I just found it deeply ironic listening to them talk about it and basically learn none of the lessons that this Broadway play and what Murrow's ethics of journalism is trying to communicate to them. With that all said, good night and good luck. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys did as well. I don't know if you guys will get the chance to stream this at a later date. I don't think you will, but maybe you will. But to everyone who saw this, like I said, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found my discussion of it fruitful. If you did, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of good night and good luck. I'll be back Tuesday, I've been putting it off for a few days, but I have a Wes Anderson discussion video coming out because I saw the Phoenician scheme. Spoiler alerts, I thought it was delightful. So we'll be talking about that Tuesday. Thank you so much to everyone watching this, and I hope you subscribe to my channel for more.